Here is Earth, here is Europe, and here is Italy. Italy is home to the Pope, kinda, wine, and pizza, but more importantly, it's home to Rome, the birthplace of the Roman Empire. Now let's go back to the 200s BC. By this point, the good old city-state of Rome was at the humble beginnings of an empire. The Romans had taken over much of the Italian peninsula, but with all this land came a new problem. To the south, there was a not-so-little city called Carthage that was also expanding. Carthage had Sicily, which made them and the Romans neighbors, and as it happened so often with neighbors in the ancient world, they didn't get along. Carthage was worried that the Romans would try and conquer Sicily, and the Romans were afraid of Carthage's great navy, understandably so, because the Romans had virtually none to speak of. So all this conflict led up to 3 great wars between the two powers that we now know of today as the Punic Wars. So, the year is now 264, and the Punic Wars start. Rome has no navy. They don't have a navy, and given the geography of the region, this is not a good thing. Soon enough, though, they managed to capture a Carthaginian ship to use as a model to build their own. After that, the Romans were able to fend off the Carthaginians, and in 2041 BC, the Carthaginians asked for peace. This resulted in the Carthaginians having to pay a large indemnity, or money for damages, and they had to give up Sicily. With the score now 1-0 in the favor of the Romans, you're probably feeling pretty good if you're the Romans, and not so good if you're Carthage. And thus, just a mere 23 years later, a new war started. In this war we have Hannibal, one of the greatest generals ever at the helm of the Carthaginian army. Hannibal takes his troops, which comprise of infantry, cavalry, and even freaking war elephants, from Spain, across the Alps. Let me remind you that he had war elephants, and he crossed the Alps, and he went into Italy. Now, crossing the Alps took a good toll on his troops, but did this stop Hannibal? Of course not. Hannibal marched his troops down the Italian peninsula, ravaging the countryside as he went. This led the nearby people to hide in cities, which worked out great because Hannibal, in all his genius, didn't have siege weapons. Great job there, buddy. So, the Romans, now protected safely in their cities, were able to hold out against the Carthaginians and launch their own counterattack. This forced Hannibal to go back to Africa to defend Carthage. In Africa, Hannibal ran into the Roman general Sphero, and in 202 BC, Sphero defeated Hannibal, and in turn, Carthage asked for peace again. Carthage paid an even larger indemnity this time. They lost their navy and their Spanish colonies. Now, by this point, Rome was way more powerful than puny Carthage. But out of pure hatred of Carthage, Rome decided to finish them off. From 149 BC to 146 BC, Rome sieged the city and took it over. After taking them over, they razed the city and destroyed the surrounding landscape. By 133 BC, the Roman Empire looked like this. If you look closely, you might notice that Greece is a part of this area. This is because during the Second Punic War, the Macedonians were allied with the Carthaginians. And after Rome won the war, they thought it would be a great idea to beat up on Carthage's ally a little too.